Eyewitness News presents Newsmakers with your hosts, Jane Ann Bugda and Andy Mahalchik.
Hello and welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Andy Mahalchik.
And I'm Jane Ann Bugda. We're focusing on an interesting topic today, gambling addictions. We'll learn why some experts call it a hidden addiction.
And our panel of experts will talk about the warning signs of gambling addiction and where to find help and how this pandemic is fueling gambling addiction for some folks in our community.
We'll introduce you to our guest, and our conversation begins when this edition of Newsmakers returns right after this. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Jane Ann Bugda along with Andy Mahalchik. And Andy and I have been doing this show for a little over 20 years now, and I think this is the first time that we have focused solely on an addiction, the gambling addiction, and we've covered a lot of addictions subjects over the years.
You know, sadly and unfortunately, a lot of addictions out there, and we try and focus on those that are really coming to the forefront in the community. Gambling addiction has always been out there, but for some reason, and we'll talk about that today, it sort of is not talked about as much as the other addictions. That changes today.
And we have a great panel of experts with us. We are joined by Jason Harlan, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services, Stephanie Wolnick, who is the Prevention Specialist at Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services, and Josh Urcole, who is the Executive Director of the Council on Compulsive Gambling of Pennsylvania. We want to thank you for being with us today. This is an important topic, and as I was researching it, I learned a lot. So first of all, we want to start a little bit by getting our viewers a little bit acquainted about your organization. So tell us a little bit about Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services, and then we'll go to Josh.
Sure. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it. You're right. This is a very important topic. Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services we're a nonprofit that's been around since 1973. And what we do is we provide substance use disorder treatment and gambling treatment for individuals who need it. We also have a prevention side to our organization. And what they do is they essentially go into the community and the schools and teach various topics as far as substance use disorders are concerned. So there's a lot that we do for the community and a lot of collaboration with many other facilities in the community as well. So we're here to help and we're happy.
Josh?
We are the Council on Compulsive Gambling of Pennsylvania, basically a statewide program that focuses on helping people who might be struggling with a gambling problem, obviously. We cover all of Pennsylvania. We too are a nonprofit organization, and we basically advocate for getting help to people who need it, whether it be an individual or a family member of an individual. We basically want to put them in touch with help that's available. And the main way that we do this is by connecting folks with help through our statewide Helpline service, which in Pennsylvania can be accessed either by calling 1-800-GAMBLER or by using the chat or text features that we have available on our website. And basically, this 24-hour service that can connect folks with other tools and resources and other ways to get help that are available throughout Pennsylvania. And our website, which is pacouncil.com, has a lot of great information, a lot of downloadable information. So, anybody who's curious about problem gambling or any type of gambling help that's available, please feel free to visit.
Folks, how common is a gambling addiction? In the United States, especially in our area, northeastern and central Pennsylvania, how common is it?
Gambling is a major issue here in northeastern Pennsylvania. As I said, our organization, we have about 5 clinicians who are certified to do gambling treatment. And as you know, Andy and Jane Ann, there's a casino 10 minutes from us, so that there's a lot of foot traffic in there on a daily basis. So yeah, it's very prevalent. There's a lot of individuals who call our organization looking for help. It's spiked drastically in the last couple months with COVID, with online gambling and the accessibility. So it's very prevalent, and it's a major issue right now in northeastern Pennsylvania.
A lot of us, may use gambling as fun, something to do, take a little chance here and there. But how do you know when you are developing a problem? What are some of the signs?
And There are a number of signs. Obviously, unlike other addictions, things like addiction to alcohol or addiction to certain drugs, it might be a little bit more difficult because a lot of times there aren't physical signs. But it's usually related to behaviors, the way people react to situations, obviously the way people react to activities that are considered to be gambling. And there are many. Obviously, there are casinos and online gambling, like Jason just mentioned. But this can really impact people from all different areas. It can impact people from all different walks of life, and it doesn't have to just be a typical type of gambling that you might see as a recognizable form of gambling. We have folks that call the Helpline with lottery situations, scratch-off addiction. Obviously, even taking it a step further, we have folks who struggle with activities like bingo, believe it or not, where basically it may or may not always have to do with financial situations, but a lot of times it goes even deeper than that, and really creates problems in a number of different areas in an individual's life.
Well, the question I have when we talk about gambling addiction, years ago, Nancy Reagan, the first lady, used to say, just say no to drugs. And we learned that was a good start, but it's physiological. I think some folks can understand, and bear with me on this, an addiction to a substance. Your body relies on it. It gives it chemical pleasure, whatever. But with gambling, explain the dynamic of that. In other words, how do people get addicted to gambling? That seems, I know it might sound like a crazy question, but how do you get addicted to gambling, and what do people get out of it that you can understand? Maybe alcohol or drugs, there's some physiological basis, but what about gambling?
Well, you know what? It's still the same thing as far as dopamine in the brain is released, not from the money aspect from it, but from the winning aspect of it. And so it's very much like drug addiction. It was what happens in the brains, and that's what we're kind of afraid of with younger people, starting to gamble and bet and that kind of thing, because their brains aren't fully developed until they're 25. So if that dopamine keeps getting released, from the anticipation of winning. It's not even winning, it's the anticipation of winning that causes the dopamine to be released in their bodies to feel good, believe it or not.
And it's not just limited, like we would think adults. You're mentioning teenagers. So to me, what age do you see someone starting maybe with an addiction to gambling?
Well, believe it or not, 97% of the social casino games are accessible to those 12 and under. It's incredible. I know, right? But also we have to remember that those games like Fortnite and all those kind of games, there's an opportunity there to gamble, to bet. They're enticed to purchase things in order to have a chance to get a higher score. Okay. And they do it. Now, kids don't think that they're betting. They don't, this is just part of the game to them. I was in a classroom the other day, and because it's Problem Gambling Awareness Month, I brought it up. I asked them, I said, do you know anybody that gambles? And they all looked at each other and like, well, my grandma gives me a scratch off for, birthdays. And that's where it starts, believe it or not. Because it is illegal for them to gamble under the age of 18. But, I said, do you realize that every time you flip a coin, you're gambling? I said, do you realize that in your games, you're gambling? And I explained it to them. They were fascinated. They're like, wow, never even knew that. So, yes, they do, but they don't know that they do.
I want to go back before somebody mentioned bingo. Now, bingo to me is like American apple pie and Chevrolet, okay? So you're saying, again, just explain this. Folks do get addicted to a bingo, like a bingo type thing, the actual game?
Absolutely. Bingo is something that falls under the category of a potential gambling disorder as well. We've had clients come through our doors that absolutely love dabbing the card. That's part of the whole situation. They become used to it. It's something, bingo, absolutely, especially in northeastern Pennsylvania, that can become a major problem for a lot of individuals.
How difficult is it to admit that you have a gambling problem?
We see that a lot. We get that, that acts as a barrier a lot of the times with folks reaching out for help. You have to look at it from a number of different angles here. That first of all, it's not like every gambling problem is the same. So it's not a situation where you either have it or you don't. Basically, anytime there's any type of negative impact as a result of participating in gambling, that really could constitute a problem. And for some, that might just be maybe gambling a little bit more frequently than they feel like they should. And for others, it might be as extreme as they're losing their home or they're losing a relationship or something like that. And there's a tremendous amount of stigma and shame associated with gambling problems, because a lot of times folks are very quick to be judgmental, very quick to just say, why don't you just stop? It's difficult for them to wrap their head around the idea that the folks who are struggling don't have that control. And, like we were just talking about, it's the way that the brain is interpreting that activity. It's not a conscious choice necessarily. It's not a situation where they're just being selfish or they just want to continue doing it. A lot of times it's a situation where they just absolutely cannot control what they're doing.
Very quickly, I won't mention the apps, but I'm watching our newscast or watching programs on TV or online, and I see apps, gambling apps. So I'm thinking, if there's a problem with gambling addiction, or you for the most part have to go to a casino, maybe go out and buy a ticket or whatever. But now you have an app that's on your phone. It's just it's more convenient, and just, does it open the door more, make it more available to especially the younger folks?
Yeah, accessibility is the key here. Andy, you make a great point. I mean, I could essentially be on my phone right now. I'm not, but I could be playing poker just from the old cell phone in front of my hand. The applications are amazing. The accessibility, as we know, when you have accessibility, the potential is there for abuse. So it's come a long way. Technology is a great thing, but it's also a bad thing as well in some sense. So applications and internet can play a major role in somebody developing a gambling disorder.
And something as innocent sounding as Candy Crush, for example, has a betting component to it, where again, you can purchase items to possibly get a higher score. And that's chance. That's not a guarantee. That's a chance. And that's exactly what gambling is.
You're talking about, gambling and this, but somebody might be home and say, I don't gamble every day. Do you have to gamble every day to develop an addiction?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's often the idea, right? Is that somebody who has some type of an addiction is doing it all the time. And, again, it kind of goes back to that not being a black and white situation. Some people may gamble every day and they may not have a problem at all. They may enjoy it. They may keep things at a responsible level and never have it progress to anything more. And somebody else may gamble once a week, once a month, and every time they do, they kind of go on a binge of gambling that could be problematic. So it's tough to say, that there's a required amount of time or there's too much or anything like that, because it's really, again, very individualistic. What we tend to look at more are changes that somebody may go through over the course of time, and how does that reflect how their relationship with this activity looks. A lot of times that can be very indicative that there is something going on, and if it's concerning, that's when it might be time to reach out and ask for help.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Josh makes a great point. I think, we've had clients come in the agency that we've treated, and, they gambled once a week. But when they gamble once a week, they're blowing thousands of dollars. So, blowing that much money that quick is a major issue, or it may not be an issue if you can afford it. You have to really dissect the problem, like Josh said, and that's really important. And that's why evaluation is extremely important as well.
And just, again, like any addiction, alcohol, substance abuse, whatever, there's collateral damage with the family, especially with gambling addiction. It can really, affect the bill paying the mortgage, the college educate, whatever. I mean, putting gas in the car. I mean, that's an impact that you can see in real time, really, I would think every day, if it gets to that point.
Yeah, this is just like a substance use disorder. This is a ripple effect. It becomes money issues, frustration, potential mental health issues because of a gambling disorder. This is something, and I hate to use the word right now during COVID, but it's very contagious to family members. It's something that is dangerous. People don't realize that, somebody who has a gambling problem, it just doesn't affect them. It affects everybody surrounding them. So that's a major, major issue.
We see a lot of reports come out that show anywhere from 8 to 10, 11 people for every one person with a significant gambling problem. That's how many are impacted. So, when you think about it, most people aren't going to develop a problem. So, I don't want to misconstrue anything. The majority of the population can gamble, regularly, occasionally. They do so with whether they realize it or not. They have limits in place, time limits, money limits. They know that they're only going to spend so much time participating. They're only going to spend so much money before it gets to be a little bit uncomfortable for them. And then they're going to stop. But, when we have, a percentage of the population who's struggling, and then you multiply that by 8, 9, 10, 11 people who are also impacted. Now what we're looking at is not just an isolated incident, but we're looking at something that's on a much larger scale. So it really does become much more of a public health concern.
Is there a certain type of gambling that leads to a greater addiction, or it can have more of a domino effect? Is it like, for example, casino, horse racing, the state lottery, bingo? Is there a certain thing that opens the door wider to that possible addiction?
I could tell you from the treatment end, and Josh, might have a different answer, but there's an array that walks through our doors. I mean, I hate to say it, and we're not anti-gambling. We're there to help people who need the help. But slot machines are a big thing in our area. Probably, if I took my best guess, 75% of the people that walk through our doors are having issues with slot machines. So that's just from what we see from our treatment end.
And that's,
I'm sorry. Steph,
no, you go right ahead, Josh, please.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of just support what Jason was saying. I mean, typically what we've seen throughout the course of time with our helpline statistics, slot machines do represent the highest percentage of calls as far as prevalence rates. A lot of that, again, has to do with proximity to casinos as well. So from some parts of the state, you might be 2-3 hours away from a casino. And what's really interesting is with the pandemic, obviously with casinos shutting down and there being all these restrictions in place for so long, there was a tremendous shift from casino gambling over to internet gambling. Obviously sports, when that was available, when that wasn't restricted, but the online casino gambling, that was up and running by the time the pandemic began. And there were several operators that were offering this type of gambling. And what we saw was a shift from slots to internet gambling as the most problematic. And I think what it really comes down to is the continuous rate of play at a long time, at a long period of time, is that, it's not like old time slot machines. It's not like old time events where you might have to wait, 10 or 15 seconds, or for a horse race, you might have to wait 15 or 20 minutes in between races. Now with online technology, with the computers that run these different types of machines, wagers can be placed as frequently as every 2 or 3 seconds. And when you think about that, that equates to 1,500 turns per minute or per hour. So what we find is the continued rate at a high speed of play. When you have this type of dopamine reaction in play, that's where a lot of times things can become very slippery for folks.
Well, I want to remind everyone that we do have information on both of your websites, on our website, pahomepage.com. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation. Our topic today is gambling addictions. You're watching Newsmakers, and we are a proud recipient of 3 Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasting Awards for Excellence in Public Affairs Programming, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Jane Ann Bugda along with Andy Mahalchik, and our conversation today is about gambling addictions. We are joined by Jason Harlan and Stephanie Wolnick. They're from the Wyoming Valley Alcohol and Drug Services, and Josh Urkel, who's from the Pennsylvania Council on Compulsive Gambling. And I wanted to ask this, we were when we have done other shows, we have had guests on who were from, maybe had been battling alcoholism or battling a heroin addiction. But when you talk about a gambling addiction, and I know I was reading a lot about this, they consider it a hidden addiction. Can you explain that?
Sure. A gambling addiction is sometimes considered hidden for several reasons. Number one, it's socially acceptable, number one, okay? Just like alcohol is. Everything becomes desensitized over time by society sometimes. So, when you start establishing casinos, when you start establishing online betting, that creates a desensitizing situation. So, what that does is it allows people to not really look at it the same as it was previous to that. So, some people might look at it and say, there's a casino 10 minutes away, or somebody could, log right onto their computer. So it's acceptable. That's very, very dangerous. Okay. What Josh said earlier as well, too, is you have to relate it back to stigma. Stigma is just so important that we work on as a community. It bothers me as a treatment professional when we hear certain words used when it comes to somebody who's addicted to something. It's terrifying. Why would somebody want to expose themselves or get help if they know they're going to be chastised for it? That's very frustrating. So, in turn, a lot of people will essentially say, I'm not going to say a word. I'm going to get chastised for it. I'm going to get labeled. That's not healthy. So I think when we talk about the word hidden addiction, I think there are two major reasons as to why it is considered a hidden addiction.
What kind of treatment, for example, you talk about drug and alcohol treatment, you're thinking eventually you have to get off of the substance. But what kind of treatment or counseling is available for gambling? Well, I mean, how do you stop them from gambling? What do you do? Is it changing their thought process? How do you deal with it? So some of the mechanics.
I think there's a lot of modalities that we use in the substance use disorder world and the gambling world. What we try to do is we try to help individuals do some new thinking, rewire the brain a little bit, help them with a big part of gambling treatment is helping them with giving them advice, financial reasons. As we know, gambling is something that can take away some of your financial situation. So we have to help people rethink. We have to help people, get a better sense of where they're at up here. There's just so much, it takes time. So there's different modalities that exist. One of the big things is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. We use that on a consistent basis with our clients. That's very, very important. And it seems to be very, very positive. So a lot of people are getting better. Please understand that through treatment and different support groups. So yeah, it's a process. Treatment is a process, so it takes time.
So what is the responsibility of the gambling industry if someone says, I have a problem? They can sign up for what is it, the list that you go on so you don't have to, so you say, I don't want to come into the casino, or help me with the word, I'm trying to think what it is.
Self-excluded?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, there's obviously, we're not, living in the Wild West here. This is, obviously a highly regulated activity in Pennsylvania. If a legal establishment wants to become regulated as a casino or a casino operator or offer an online activity, they would need to go through a licensing process with the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. And basically, there's a lengthy process that needs to be adhered to in terms of making sure that the term is responsible gaming or responsible gambling, to make sure that that's in place. And basically, what that entails is coming up with resources, connecting with folks in the community, having employee trainings that outline how to handle a situation if somebody asks for help or is displaying warning signs of having a problem. Obviously, things like self-exclusion, which you just mentioned, which is basically a self-imposed ban that people can actually put themselves on if they feel like they're struggling and they need help in that regard. So it's a great opportunity. We've had thousands of people who have actually self-excluded in Pennsylvania over the course of the time. And believe it or not, one of the highest, the concentration of the self-excluded folks is in the northeastern Pennsylvania area. So in Lackawanna and Luzerne County, we have a very high percentage of folks who have banned themselves. They've taken the step to put a barrier between themselves and the casino. And, while there are regulations, obviously things like the 800 gambler number needs to be posted on all advertisements and websites and printed material. Most of the casinos in the state, they go above and beyond the minimum requirements. And I think that's really important. I think that's really important to the communities around them. And I think it's really important to the folks who are visiting to know that there is at least some level of commitment that's been made to try to minimize some of the problems that we're seeing.
We have less than 2 minutes left, folks. A quick question. Family members watching this now, they know that Uncle Bob or Dad or Mom or my sister or brother has a problem. They're not sure how to handle it. Can they call on behalf of somebody and say, we need help? Can they do that?
As far as the state helpline, the Pennsylvania helpline, 1-800-GAMBLER, anybody can call at any time for any reason. If it's for information, if it's to get help directly there. And again, the website, the pacouncil.com website, both are great resources as far as putting people in touch with help and giving them additional information.
And as far as locally, we're based in Wilkes-Barre. You guys have our information and they're displaying it. It's a simple phone call. If you don't have insurance, it's not a big deal. What's nice is, as Josh mentioned, the Department of Drug and Alcohol programs, they help pay for people that need treatment. So please do not let finances be an issue when it comes to attaining help.
And I know that you do go out into the community and you do speak to groups about this. So we also have that information up there for anybody that has a group that wants to hear something on this. We're under a minute here. I do want to remind everyone that we have this information on pahomepage.com under the Newsmakers link. And Stephanie, Jason, and Josh, we want to thank you for joining us today. We could have gone an hour with this program because so much we didn't cover, including we want you to check out, there's a check sheet on the on Josh's website there to see if you have a problem. You go through the steps. We encourage you to call them for help if you feel that you have a problem. Thank you for joining us today. For Andy Mahalchik and everyone behind the scenes, I'm Jane Ann Bugda. Thank you for making Newsmakers part of your day. Check us out online on pahomepage.com, and we'll talk again next time.